Hello and welcome to our latest video from C3UG. My name is Heiko Voigt from Harborlight Software in Halifax. Gordon?
I'm Gordon Hegfeld from HCL Software. Graham?
Makers from Bradtech Systems in Vancouver. And Colin?
Colin Breckles with Castleberg. And today Gordon's going to share with us what is new with AppDevPack version 108. Gordon, over to you.
Okay, I guess I'll share my screen here. And go to my slides, which I'm not going to go into presentation mode because we know that causes problems. So today I'm going to talk about what's new in the 108 version of the AppDevPack. So a couple things here. First of all, Node version 14 is supported and actually required. So new version of Node, new version of NPM. So if you're using the Domino, the Node.js version of the APIs, you'll need to upgrade Node.
One quick question that I couldn't see in the documentation for that, is that required for IAM as well? Because yes. IAM was still one version behind the rest of the AppDevPack. It's 14 yes. For everything. Okay.
Yeah, 14 for everything, and that right, and the upgrade for NPM there as well. And the next thing here is the OAuth 2 support for Domino apps. That's a fairly significant feature. I'll go into that in some detail here, but I think we'll do a separate presentation for that. That's more of a deep dive. Act as user support for create and delete database, which I'll explain in a minute, but essentially gives you more control over who's actually performing the operation. One of my favorite things here is upsert operation, which is only available with the AppDevPack APIs. And then some minor changes to multi-item handling, which is more of an FYI if you're using documents that may have multiple items with the same name in them. So first of all, let's move to the OAuth support for Domino apps. So what we've basically done here is expand what was originally just support for calendar and FreeBusy to any REST API hosted by the Domino HTTP stack. So this supports both APIs inside an NSF and external APIs, and Heiko gave me a hard time about this, so I had to put his name here. So I didn't actually realize when I was doing this feature originally that there was all these variations. So I believe I've covered all the variations necessary to support any legacy REST APIs that may exist in the Domino ecosystem. Configuration is through the ADP config NSF user interface that showed up a couple of releases ago for Proton configuration. I'm going to just give you a brief tour of that. But essentially, you define your application there, you define your scopes, the actions that are associated with those scopes, and the HTTP methods. And no code changes needed to your application, it just works. And with the IAM service, we've tried to make the integration as smooth as possible here, where we have changes that come from ADP config and they get synced over to the IAM service. So you're going to create your own scope labels and grant messages and all the things that get surfaced during the OAuth flows, and you define them in the ADP config NSF user interface, and they show up over in the IAM service. So
is this true for any application you can define, or just for the new Domino part? Because if you have an application definition today in IAM, you couldn't change these messages, right?
Correct. So it's these definitions are just for the new applications supported by this feature. So the existing ones you can't change.
Okay.
Okay. So actually, I'm going to switch over just to give you just a brief overview of this. So this is what the new user interface looks like in the ADP config. and essentially all the definitions for the applications are listed here, and you get a form. And I'm not going to go through this in great detail, but you can essentially define what servers the definition corresponds to. You can describe it. You can, and then here you give it the path. For instance, API sample, for instance, and this little checkbox is the global option I was talking about, which essentially allows you to prepend this path with some database name, like that. And then here you can add scopes here. And here you can put in your own labels, and you can select which methods actually correspond to what scopes, and you enter descriptions here. And so everything, we try to make everything nice here in terms of the UI. And then on the IM side of things, what you'll notice is when you go to the IM service, and let me log in here. Whenever you create one of those resource definitions in ADP config, they'll show up over here as resource providers automatically. They'll show up as essentially read-only, but what we're doing here is trying to save people from doing a bunch of duplicated work, obviously, and everything that you entered over in ADP config, it gets synced over in the IM service and shows up here. And then we've also added this little table down here that shows the scopes that are coming over, so that when you're developing your application, you can actually copy these right out of here and reference them in your application. So and any changes you make over in the NSF get synced over here automatically. So you don't have to touch anything over here once you get these things defined. So that's sort of the feature at a high level. Like I said, we'll do another session where we dive into this in more detail because there's a lot of things to know about OAuth. So the next new thing is create and delete database with act as user. So the point of this is that today, if you use the create and delete database APIs, the identity of the creator is going to be the application functional ID, and there's a lot of times when you actually might want it to be someone else using the act as user identity feature that we have in other APIs. So now we've added that capability to the create and delete database API, so that you can have the person that's actually acting on this these database operations actually be the user that's performing them. So that's an important option we've added there. And then upsert is something that you see in other database APIs, the NoSQL type APIs, at least that I'm aware of. Maybe SQL databases as well, but this is an operation that essentially says if create a document if it's not present, and otherwise update it. And this happens a lot. I'm sure you guys have plenty of examples of this, and I know there's examples of this even in the IM service, for example, where we need to do things like this. So this is concurrency protected. So the backend in Proton is actually creating a semaphore based on a query that when you go to create a document based on a particular query, it will essentially make a lock and prevent other duplicate documents from being created. And I say it's wicked fast. Which is a good thing. I was just going to switch over to it just to show you a quick example of the code.
How fast is it?
It's wicked fast, yeah. And you can tell I'm from New England. That's a New Englander thing to say. So here I've got if you've used the AppDevPack at all, you recognize this code. We define a server, we define a document here, which is using the abbreviated formats for document definitions. And then here we just call upsert document, pass in the query in. And if there's 5 or 6 other, or 10 or 100 other operations of this using the same query at the same time, only one of them is going to create the database, or create the document, and the remaining operations will update the document. And of course, in these cases, the last one wins. But there's a lot of places where you want this behavior to prevent duplicate documents from being created, or just all kinds of inconsistencies. So this is, like I said, this is something new we just added in 108, and I don't know of any other place in the Domino ecosystem or the Domino set of APIs where you can do this. So this is unique to AppDevPack. And the last thing is really just a minor FYI. I don't know how many people deal with duplicate items in documents. I know that I've had to in my history of dealing with Notes Domino, but we were sort of inconsistent about whether or not items, when you describe items to the API, when you hand them off to the API, if they were in canonical format or not, and it was causing some errors and inconsistent behavior. So we've basically changed the behavior to say if you're going to actually deal with duplicate items and set that flag to true, that you got to make all your items be in the canonical format, and you can check the docs for what that actually means. But it's generally a much more verbose format that you may not typically use. But if you're dealing with duplicate items, you got to use the canonical format. So that is it in a nutshell for 108. Any other questions?
I'll just throw in that the upsert is very cool. I've crossed paths with it a couple of times in Mongo, and it's kind of a neat way of thinking. So I'm actually looking forward to giving this a play. That's a fun addition.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
So one question that probably that came to my mind pretty quick is are there any plans to extend the OAuth support even further, like say for regular XPages logins, or for say Verse logins and stuff like that? Would that be possible or doable from your point of view?
Well, we've talked about it. I don't know about plans, but there's certainly plans to enhance the IAM service as it stands, because we obviously there are things that need to be updated. But we have talked about doing that. I don't have specific plans at the moment though. But it's one of those things I can take back to product management.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Gordon. Still more fun stuff to go and play with, so thank you. Colin, what's next?
Yeah, awesome job. And we've got some stuff coming up. We actually just had the AppDevPack roundtable. Coming out of that, we had some interesting feedback from people. Heiko put some work into creating some charts showing some findings, which were really interesting to say the least, and show a lot of enthusiasm for AppDevPack. And those will be shared on a C3UG blog. We may not make a video out of that one. So go to c3ug.ca, check that out, and you'll find all our other goings on. And as always, like, comment, subscribe, keep us alive with the YouTube algorithm, and have a great day, everybody.